Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I'm your host as always, Professor Prime. Today we're going to talk about math and Justice League slash Justice League Unlimited, the culmination of awesomeness. So here's how it's going to go. I'm going to talk about Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, what led up to these awesome shows, as well as how math is used along the way, in a variety of ways, for the record, and also just how I feel about those shows. Spoilers, they're wonderful, and I'm going to talk about how great they are. Also, speaking of spoilers, you're free to assume there will be actual spoilers in this video, just to be safe. I will try to avoid major spoilers, but I make no promises, so you do with that information what you will. Um, Stuff comes up, you know? So, just keeping that in mind, we're going to move forward, all right? So, with Justice League, it came out back in 2001 to 2004, and it was not the first of its kind because it was another show in a line of shows that a lot of people refer to as the Bruce Timm universe, right? Like the DCAU. Um, and it's brilliant. And it had a sequel series that came right away in 2004, um, called Justice League Unlimited. And so yeah, so from 2001 to 2004, you had Justice League. From 2004 to 2006, you had Justice League Unlimited. Overall, 2001 to 2006, you had 5 years of excellent television and storytelling. And here's the thing, like I said, right? These were not the first shows of their kind. We start with Batman, the animated series. We later get Superman animated series. Batman animated series gets rebranding. The New Adventures of Batman becomes a thing. Later, we get Batman Beyond, Static Shock, and the Zeta Project, which was a spinoff of Batman Beyond. Um, and I'm trying to think if I'm missing anything else. But the whole thing is Justice League. Justice League starts off like 10 years in this big, ever expanding universe. 10 years or so, right? And Justice League Unlimited caps it off at around like 15 years for that entire universe, right? Which is kind of crazy. So we had 15 years of pretty great television and storytelling. So if we get further into Justice League, right? That first segment, right, with Justice League, trying to think of a better way to say this. Let me restart. So Justice League ran for 2 seasons spread out over those 3 years that it ran, and it had 52 episodes, with each season having 26. And oftentimes the episodes were two-parters, with the exception here or there where it might have been three. Like for instance, the end of season two. Um, but yeah, so that's how it was divided out. Whereas Justice League Unlimited ran for 3 seasons. Um, so instead of like 2 seasons spread out over 3 years, it ran for 3 seasons spread out over 2 years, with the episodes being 22 minutes, or like a half hour if you prefer, just like the other Justice League. But they weren't really two-parters for the most part. And it ran for 13 episodes in each season, so a total of 39 versus the 52 that came with Justice League. And already, there's math in that, and that seems like a small thing, but you got to figure like these things take time, and you got to decide how you're going to spread out the episode. And we're going to get more into that, but I wanted to talk about the structures and the differences because, right, ultimately, whether we're talking about Justice League or Justice League Unlimited, these were like regular half an hour program shows, so like 22 minutes, like I was saying, right? But Justice League had that whole two-part structure. Um, and what I find interesting about that is, while that is true for Justice League, and Justice League Unlimited had more episodic episodes, at the end of the day, though, it still had these like overarching stories, right? Uh, with the Cadmus one being like, I think like the longer, the longest running overarching story. Um, and it is brilliant. Oh my god, it's brilliant. So anyway, to go more into things, when you look at how these episodes run, there were some differences between Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, but for the most part, the way these episodes run, right? you have 22 minutes, so you got to decide what you're going to stick in that episode. And there's math in that. There's math in the animation. There's math in what's going to be in that episode, how it ties into other episodes. There's math in the characters, how they're drawn. There's math in how you scale these characters to each other and objects in the animated world, i.e., buildings and cars, stuff like that. There's math in making it all make sense, right? And being consistent with it. There's math in the coloring and having everything, work together, right? To not overpower each other. And there's math in the voice acting, the volume that these characters are speaking at, the inflections in their voice, their breathing, mixing that in with the sound that's used in the show. And, there's math in that sound, using different effects, all that. There's math at every conceivable level and the excellent choreography that's used in the fight, right? Because not only is there math in the animation as a whole, but math in that, math in the timing, math in getting certain actions conveyed, and there's math in the powers and how they're used throughout these shows, right? Um, and it's just it's crazy to me because right like take a character like Flash. Speed is a very mathematical concept, and there's math in depicting how that speed is in the show and being consistent with that, as well as just the characters and actually using their powers. All right, because if Flash is using speed, he's using math whether he's writing it down or not. um, and with Superman, he's got a bevy of powers and he's using math and across the board. And I think like one of the best examples is, there's math in his strength. Like how strong is he and like how much does he have to hold back in any given fight, any given situation, right? How much force is he using in his punches? And there's math in deciding whether he's going to block something, take the hit, or move out of the way, right? There's math in all that. Math in the money involved in that world. Math in every other real world analog in that animated universe, right? And here's the thing, sometimes the math is like explicitly stated, right? Or explicitly shown, but whether it's explicit or not, the math is lurking in the background because like a lot of things in this animated universe are gonna have like real world parallels, right? There is math in building those buildings, right? There's math in building Batman's gadgets. There's math in the society and how it's functioning, how money's used, how different businesses run. And you see that in different forms in the show. Again, whether it's explicit or not, that's an understanding. And it's just like cool to think about because they have to decide, well, hey, what characters can I use, and do we have the rights to use this character, that character, and how much are we going to pay the animators, how much are we going to pay the writers, the voice actors, and all these other people, right? um, and that's all I have, right? And everything has to come together to make this awesome show. And what I think is interesting is how things expand over time. Because in the beginning of Justice League, right, you have the Seven, right? You have Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, the Wally West version of the Flash, John Stewart, Green Lantern, Hawk Girl, and John Jones, aka the Martian Manhunter. Um, Right, you start with them, but you're also introduced to other characters in the DC universe, other heroes, other villains, and etc. And then by the time you get to Justice League Unlimited, the roster has greatly expanded. I think it was something crazy, like maybe around 50 or so. I don't think you see everyone every time, of course, but like, or like even that great number, but you get the idea that it's pretty high no matter what. And it's just interesting balancing that and that change in things because right in Justice League you focus on the seven, the original seven in that universe, but then that expands in Justice League Unlimited, and you have to balance things, right? You still want to show the seven, you still want to show their journeys, but you're showing new people too. You're showing different team combinations. You have to decide what works and how to divide out the time in terms of like, well, who is to be here for how long and what are they gonna do, and you have to map up these stories in advance. You have to do storyboarding, and there's math in all of it, and I think that's cool because here's the thing, right? A lot of time I think like we live in a weird society where we try to divorce math from art, but you really can't. There's a lot of math in art, and there's a lot of art in math, and it all goes hand in hand. And I think it's cool to see the math in action because whether we're talking about the motion that comes to animation or just like the way things are drawn, there's math across the board. And I think that's really cool. And I enjoyed so much of Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. And like I said, there's that shift from Justice League to Justice League and Unlimited in terms of the cast and just balancing that. Had to be something else, and there's math in that, and not to mention there are jokes in these shows, and I've been saying this, but comedy is very mathematical. There's so much with timing, and then there's like the idea of a joke itself, right? You can boil that down to a formula: setup plus punchline equals joke. And here's the thing: they have to balance that with the drama, right? And going from there and having ongoing jokes, and it's just like it's great. And they deal with space travel, they deal with time travel. There's crazy stuff, and there's math and all that too, and it's really cool. And it's just like wild to me to think that again these shows are the culmination of awesomeness, right? That universe went on for a long time, right? Because you start off with Batman, right? And you're just growing up, and you don't necessarily think it's gonna expand the way it does. And then it's like, okay, yeah, you have Batman, you have Superman, and it's going, and it's okay. Batman gets the rebranding. You're like, okay, we're gonna roll with it. But then you got Static Shock. You got Batman Beyond, the Zeta Project, which was short-lived, but it happened nonetheless. And so you have all these things, and I'm sure like some other people who are like pretty well versed with the comics are probably wondering like when are we gonna get a Justice League, right? And like watching some of those other shows, we see that evidence that hey, we got the components to make the Justice League, and like even in Batman Beyond, there was a future Justice League, and I'm pretty sure that an episode where like or set of episodes where that happened before Justice League, because Justice League came out in 2001. They might have been some overlap because Batman Beyond ended in 2001. Justice League started in 2001. I would have to look up the specific dates. But my point is, though, that you had elements of the Justice League and evidence that there was like so, and if that wasn't clear, like elements of the Justice League being able to be formed in this universe, and then thanks to Batman Beyond, evidence that they existed. Either way, there was a lot of buildup in a sense, and it's just like been kind of quiet in the background because you had like these shows, and they had their different story arcs and their overarching themes, but then you get to the Justice League, and then things just pop off, and it's great. And whether we're talking about the two-parter episodes or the longer sorry the more episodic episodes and the overall longer overarching themes in Justice League Unlimited compared to Justice League, we're good because I like the structure of Justice League, but I also like Unlimited too because I could look back at Justice League and I could think about some of the different two-parters like the Justice Lords episode or the I forgot the name, but it was the one where they go to a different universe and they deal with like the JSA stand-ins. That was a good two-parter. There's several other ones, and then there's like standouts to me from Justice League Unlimited, that just single episodes, and so both leave an impression because I could think of like the Captain Marvel episode, um, which Shazam, all right, Shazam. But back then, we all knew him as Captain Marvel. But anyway, I can think of episodes like that, like Doomsday Sanction, like that episode, Epilogue, Grudge Match, stuff like that. And I can think, hey, yeah, these are fun episodes. Although I will say, Grudge Match. I wish the premise were different, but I like the episode overall just because of the action. Also, I think like in that episode, there's a bit where the question, he's in ice cream, like he's in a freezer and he's going through ice cream. And he's like, aha, 32 flavor. And I appreciated that joke, that reference to like Baskin Robbins. And it's like, but anyway, like I see episodes like that, and that's great. Or even episodes that are like culminating, or the culmination of like a storyline are great. Because there was like one where they're all like fighting Lex, and it gets pretty crazy. Um, when Lex had kind of fused with Brainiac, and that was a whole thing. So anyway, there's a lot of great moments in that show because I'm going to focus on that for a bit because there's just like no shortage of the ways that math is used. It's just like we don't always notice it, right? We don't always think about that, but like the show can't really function without that because there's just so much math going on behind the machines or behind the scenes, behind the machines too, right? Because um, there's a lot of digital stuff going on in those shows. But anyway, it's just cool to think about, right? Because those worlds that we see come to the screen, they don't really exist without math, right? Because you have, like I said, like you have like the characters and how they're drawn, but you're considering the proportions, you're considering different perspectives that's used, you're considering the powers, and how to get certain things across visually. You're considering the colors and all of that requires math. Same with the sound effects, same with voice acting, same with storyboarding, just all that, and getting together and marketing and money. Overall, there's just math in all of it and then making it all happen. And that's really cool to me. And with those shows in general, it was great because like Justice League, it was great because you got to really know the seven, right? And you really got a better sense of them, and you got the humanity that comes with like the brilliant vocal performances, as well as how these characters were animated. Everyone was giving it their all in that series, and it's brilliant and it shows. Um, Green Lantern, like John Stewart is my favorite Green Lantern, and that show has a lot to do with that. Wally West is my favorite Flash, same thing. That Wonder Woman, my favorite interpretation of her. Um, and of course Kevin Conroy, like best Batman, and I think the Justice League and Justice League Unlimited versions were the best version of the Batman that we see in that entire universe. And I think they did more with Superman as it went on because there was a weird thing when it started where it felt like Superman was super depowered. But they got better with that, and also I like that throughout the course of Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. So many things happen that Superman gets increasingly irritated, and it shows. And I like that though. But yeah, so everyone is just giving their all in that first series, like the Justice League, and it's just like it is great. It ends pretty well, and then they switch it up with Justice League Unlimited, and it's different, but that doesn't have to be a bad thing, right? I like how the things were split up, and that you had even more characters to play off of, but they never stopped worrying about the big seven. And with those seven, they were of course legends. They were the ones who started the Justice League in that universe, and so as the Justice League continues to expand, you see like all these like things play out with Cadmus and Power and the Big Seven, like having to question themselves and their role in the bigger picture, and it's just great to see how everyone interacts. Like, and I like the back and forth with like Cadmus and Amanda Waller. That is fun stuff, and like Lex ends up playing a pretty big role in both of those series, um, which is interesting, and it's just fun to see him play off of other people. Um, but yeah, like overall, like it's just wild, right? Because you had these two big series, over a 5 year period, and they were the culmination of awesomeness, right? There was a decade that preceded that 5 years that was building up to the Justice League happening, and they started with a bang, they finished with a bang, and there was a lot of awesomeness, just all the way out, and I enjoyed the different dynamics throughout the show. It was great. They did such a brilliant job. And I have been rewatching some episodes recently, and it still holds up. Oh my god. Um, and I just like it because of the action, sure. But like I grew up on those other shows, and so when I saw Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, right? I was in high school when it started, and in college by the time it finished. And so there was that step for me, and I got into it at a time where I was getting increasingly interested in voice acting. No, just the world in general, not necessarily performing. Although that too, because I got more interested in it. It's just like I haven't. got into that in the professional sense. But over time, I hope to. But it's just more like I got more into voice acting in general, and that would later, same time, kind of get me more interested in wanting to do that at some point in the future. Which I want to look into that more. It's been a long time I've been wanting to. But my thing is, I felt inspired, right? Because like this was a time where I was cementing a lot of my interests. Like I was broadening horizons, so to speak, and there was like a lot of uh good like shows like Justice League and Justice League Unlimited where the voice acting was top tier. The same thing was happening with a lot of video games at that time, and anime was mixing it up. Like voice acting in anime had gotten way better for the dubs, and I know some people won't agree with me on that, but I mean I don't care. It's correct because there wasn't always a good track record with English dubs. This was a time though where there were some people I was starting to recognize more, and they were able to lend their talents to different shows. So it's like whether we're talking about cartoons or anime or video games, I was getting increasingly interested in voice acting overall. And it's something that I've talked about like a few times like here on the channel, like and how there's like math in that and how it all goes together, how it functions, how it flows, and I think that's really cool. But yeah, so Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, they're great shows where they couldn't really exist without math, and they couldn't really exist in the forms that we knew them without everything that preceded them, right? And those shows that I mentioned before, right? They follow the same rules in terms of what's needed for math, right? And their success, led to this. And also, I mean, one cannot forget part of like having shows like that means having merchandise and toys and all that. And there's money in that, and there's math in that money. So it's just something to consider. And feel free to add to the discussion if you would like. And if you haven't seen Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, oh my God, please do yourself that favor. And if you have, I mean, tell me what you liked about it, because I'm assuming that you liked it. If you didn't, I mean, I have questions about that too, but I'm assuming that you liked it. But more seriously, yeah, please feel free to discuss. I'll see you in the next one. Professor Prime out.